we should have also had another woman. Perhaps she would have given us another perspective of what women want in Dubai and the region. But let's start with the first question, which is, how do you see or define the next generation CEO? Jeremy, we'll start with you. Yes. Just see, it might be on.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? I've all
Yes,
confused
I
me.
said, how do you define the next generation CEO, given today's retail scenario?
I think that going forward, the next generation CEO, in some ways, is going to be very similar to the current generation CEO, because in retail, regardless of how it's changing, you're always going to have a reliance on people, on process, on systems, and on product. And as I see it, that's not really going to change. What is going to change is the omni-channel retail that we talked about this morning, and I think that's going to require a different mindset. It's going to require people that are capable of interacting with one another, of seeing the big picture, of not just operating in those kind of traditional retail silos. And I think the next generation CEO is going to have to be somebody that's really capable of putting together a cohesive team of people that really understand omni-channel in its fullest sense.
Right. Hussam, if you just look at the way Jeremy defined it, that in many ways the CEO's qualities and skill sets don't change much, would you say that the CEO would probably have to start from scratch, so to speak? Because if one looks at the last 10 years, anything that any CEO has learned is probably no longer relevant in the new technology and changing world. So would you agree with what Jeremy said, or do you think that it's going to be the same?
I agree. I think what we spend a lot of our time thinking about is our people and how to motivate the people, how to engage them, how to get them to really feel for the customer, for how to grow the business and so on. So I think a lot of the problems that we look at every day are people related. I guess the transition is to a more tech savvy culture, but I think with regards to the CEO themselves, that's not essential. The great thing that we have at Namshi is I have a partner that is very in touch with the tech world. He's a coder. He understands that, and as such, he has been able to build a team around him that can develop our brand and develop Namshi to be able to address these changes. But at the core, I think the skill set is very similar. I don't think that needs to change too much.
Mohammed, the kind of intensity one is seeing around the environment in retail, competition, collaboration, overnight companies coming through, some even shutting shop, what kind of pressures lie ahead for CEOs?
I think nowadays the biggest pressure certainly is speed of decision making and the speed of execution. And at the end of the day, referring back to the original question, a CEO is a CEO who manages a business. Managing a business means you have revenues, you have costs, and you have profit at the end of the day. So the nature of the business does not change at all. What changes is the way you interact with the different stakeholders that you have in the business. Knowledge is not as important as probably common sense and the willingness to take decisions and delegate and empower these decisions. And I think if you respect that, you're a successful CEO, regardless of your age, your new economy, old economy fit. This is what makes you successful.
But you would agree, Mohammed, that any CEO in this age, well, one thing is speed, the other is to be just flexible. Is flexibility at the core of today's leadership? Because if you don't change, and if you say, okay, I'm going to be the CEO who I was, or maybe my leadership qualities may remain the same, but if you're not flexible, then you may miss the bus.
I think having the ability to reinvent yourself as a person as well as a business is absolutely essential going forward. If you look at the innovation cycles in the past, let's say 15 to 20 years, and compare them to the last 100 years, you see that the cycles have been shortening and shortening and shortening. Someone who, for example, started in bricks and mortar and was extremely successful sees now that revenues are moving towards online in a certain speed, and you need to open up for that. The question remains whether you should do it yourself or you should collaborate with someone. Maybe you should acquire skills by hiring someone new, but at the end of the day, this is what I mean by saying decision-making and speed of decision making.
Sure. Khurshid, what direction are today's businesses headed in? And let's talk about your business, for example, Marina Homes. We're talking of a situation where you have no option but to be available to your consumer at several technological points, several geographical points. What would you say is defining the speed of your expansion?
I will take it on ahead from his comments, which he rightly said. I think flexibility is the other form of adaptability. And if you don't adapt with the changing environment, changing retail demography, changing consumer habits, you're not a retailer. Then coming to technology, without technology, you cannot stay ahead of customers' expectations. Technology is not just about making a few invoices and keeping records. Technology is not bookkeeping. Technology is how do you understand your customer patterns? How do you understand shopping patterns, buying patterns, purchase values? How do you transform that kind of information into your CRM programs, into your marketing programs? How do you understand from a technological point of view what you're selling, what you want to sell in the future, how are your patterns, and so on. So technology is at the forefront of our progress.
And how is Marina Homes using technology to its focus?
We continue to improve, to evolve, to inspire our customers through all the programs that we initiate from the ground up, which is the first interface with the customer, to all the way when, in our example, a delivery is made and whatever is in between. Technology stays very close to what we do and ahead of what we do.
Vivek, let's talk about your group's business. He was referring to CRM and some of the other technological, processes, best practices that can be very handy. But from your point of view, what have you changed about your business to adopt technology?
Yeah, that's an interesting poser, Shelley. We are also in luxury and lifestyle products, but we are also big time in restaurant business. So maybe I can take a cue from that. We are the franchisees for Pizza Hut for the whole of Oman as one of our activities. And I can share with you the kind of technological interventions which we have recently introduced with phenomenal results. See, first, let's not forget that technology itself is evolving. I was talking to this guy, IT guy, and he mentioned now we are talking of the 2000 decade, the vintage decade. So 3-4 years, we are already obsolete. But one good thing that is emerging, I feel, is that technology is becoming simple to the customer to understand, simple to implement. I can take the liberty of giving a specific example, like we introduced the CRM system in our Pizza Hut. So earlier we used to send one common message to all the customers. But then we segmented it now. Now we've got 6 basic primary segments of customers. We have the loyal customers. Incidentally, you will be interested to know that 12% of our customers contribute half of our revenues. So the core customers need a totally different kind of message and promotions. Then you have the other segment who are, say, high dollar ones. They may not come very often, but when they come, they have a binge. Then there is the typical value seekers who are looking for value for money. The fourth one is the hibernators who need to be shaken up once in a while, and then they'll respond. Then we have the active one-timers, and finally, of course, the lapsed customers. So what's interesting is that separate messages of promotion has to go to each of these different segments. And the best part is that we have done away with no loyalty cards or something, nothing physical. Everything is in your smartphone and SMS. So I thought that was a very innovative way we thought we could impact the customers.
Okay, let me come back to you, Hussam, and talk about the fact that today it's not enough to understand your customer. It's not enough to only analyze the data you already have. It's about finding methods to get data that you don't have or analyze or potentially forecast what your consumer may want tomorrow. So it's a lot more about the bet on the future rather than on the present. How do you put that in your calculation as a .com?
I think specifically in our business, we need to forecast what we're buying for 9 months from now. So in a typical fashion setting, currently we're buying for spring summer 15, which is actually we finished spring summer 15. We're about to start buying for autumn winter 15. So we're buying for 6 to 9 month period ahead of time. But I think it would be very presumptuous for us to assume that we can forecast with great accuracy what they're going to be demanding in 9 months. I think what we need to work with and what you need to get very smart at is working with the data that you currently have and analyzing it to give you perspectives on the future. But you need to be very, very close to the data that you have on a day-to-day basis. I think predictions 9 months from now are great to have as a starting point, but if you're not very close to your data every single day, those projections become obsolete very quickly. So we look at our sales on a daily basis. Every one of our buyers looks at the sales of the past day, of the past week, and can analyze demand based on real-time data rather than assuming that they can predict the future.
Okay. Jeremy, how do you make consumer behavior to be predictable for yourself and your business? How does your team analyze data that they have currently, or what data are they looking for in the near future?
Well, the data that we have is the data that's available to most retail businesses, which is all about sales by product across each of our stores on an hourly level if necessary, although we don't normally look at it quite that way. So in a similar way, we're looking at daily, weekly, monthly sales. We've recently upgraded our whole CRM and customer loyalty program, and we're very excited about that. Historically, we've just had a discount-based loyalty card, and we're now moving towards a loyalty card where we are rewarding our customers on a points basis, and we're quite excited about the relaunch of that. And we're expecting to get a lot more information on how people are shopping, on what basis they're shopping, and we are planning to do a lot more of the data mining, some of which we talked about this morning. I think the holy grail, if you like, the thing that we're always looking for is the lost opportunity. How do you identify that lost opportunity? And one of the things I found fascinating this morning was the whole Bluetooth technology, the Wi-Fi technology. I'm not sure how relevant that is necessarily for us because our stores are 50, 60 square meters, but it's certainly given me some food for thought, and that's something I'm going to take away and explore with the team to see if that can drive some ideas around that. You know, how do you analyze and understand that lost opportunity? Because I think that's the next big step for retailers.
Khurshid, you were earlier talking about the need for making technology a part of your best practices in logistics and delivery. But today, technology is a very big part of bringing the consumer to you as well. How are you using that leg of technology? And as Jeremy was pointing out, that, you know, to analyze the trends that consumers are sort of driving your sales with, how are you doing that leg of the technological piece?
See, first of all, there are no such traits where you can measure certain behaviors and take it for granted. We live in a transient society here. The population comes and goes. So we have to fine-tune ourselves with every new customer as we move forward. But when it comes to driving them back, there are various activities. There's a broader picture involved and there's a micro picture involved. The broader is the strategy in terms of what do you want to do with the business? Where do you stand in front of competition? How do you want to have an edge over competition? How do you showcase your individuality in terms of your products, services, and so on? It's a combination of many things where technology goes hand in hand.
Do you use any of that technology to, let's say, reach out to your customers?
Of course. There are a number of CRM programs and marketing advertising initiatives that we do on a regular basis, from a straight brand building exercise to community touch points, sponsorships, events, etc. Not only is this a brand building exercise, but to stay in sync, in tune with the likes and dislikes of the customers and to drive them back again and again.
Okay. So before I go to the other panelists, I just want to get one thing clear. So do you do this because everyone else is doing it, because the world is social, everybody should be on Facebook or Twitter or anything else, or is it because it actually adds revenue to your business?
I think it's not us who's only doing it. Everybody is doing it. But the question is, how differently are we doing it with others? And the question is, how do you get that emotional connect with the customers, whether you do it on the floor, through programs, or as a strategy?
Okay. Mohammed, this is a very interesting thing that he just referred to, that, you're doing it not just because others are doing it, but of course, your aim is to try and analyze that customer and what they bring to your table. Now, for you, I want to just flip that question and ask you, how hard is it for you to get your entire back-end system up to speed with this love for technology? Because as .coms, you already find yourself way ahead in terms of technological use. But are your vendors, your supply chain, are they meeting those standards? Are they rushing to learn what you've already established?
That's a nice question. We have the advantage, as you said, we have an advantage that we don't have legacy. We're not a grown business that has grown over 20 years with a technology that probably was installed 20 years ago and did not evolve substantially since then. Some of the suppliers that we deal with, especially here in the region, they don't even have systems, real systems that do active supply chain management. This is at one point challenging, but then at the end of the day, what you do is you look at your entire value chain and you figure out where the leaks in the communication process, gaps, and you eliminate those by either not working with this type of people that reject technology, and you have the choice here, or you try to help them by just suggesting things and you work with them to implement that, which is the harder way and it takes longer. In our business, we don't have time, right? So we need to be dealing with people that are ready. What we have done for certain smaller suppliers is we have imposed our technology on them. If they wanted to work with us, we impose our technology and help them basically work based on our technology.
Let's get your perspective on this, Vivek, especially since, some of the things that they reflected on, it's all about speed, it's all about quick decision making. So yes, you have one arm which is dealing with hospitality and therefore new generation, but you also have a fairly traditional brick and mortar arm. Are you getting that brick and mortar arm prepared for this onslaught of technology, the need for people to buy through their phone, wanting to order on the phone and buying physically into the store? How are you dealing with all of that?
We have got panelists who are pure.com. We are one of those, as we said in the morning, omni-channel, since we sell brick and mortar as well as online. So I personally feel that, according to me, the retailing brick and mortar will always remain.
But how would you converge them? That's really the question I want to get to.
See, there are certain aspects which cannot be converged. The touch and the feel, putting it in front of your mirror and seeing. These are such basic human emotions. I feel they can never ever be removed. Having said that, the ease and the convenience of online ordering, particularly, there are certain items which are very well suited for this kind of online. Whether it is clothing is one of them, we all know. Electronics is the other. In fact, along with banking and travel, these four take 90% of the online ordering today. I repeat, banking, travel, clothes, and electronics. You normally don't go and order a DSLR camera or maybe a Chanel perfume so much. This is from our experience, I'm telling you. So there are limitations to the online ordering also. And I think that is the leverage which we want to do. You're talking convergence. I would rather say leveraging one channel along with the other.
Okay, so how are you really innovating the brick and mortar data, customer base that you're sitting on to actually make them cognizant of the fact that you do have an online platform? How are you bringing that, as you said, leverage it, but how?
Yeah, one thing which readily comes to my mind is the Facebook analytics. In fact, it's not enough just to have, I've got so many likes and so many people engaged. The amount of analytics which comes at the end of the month is absolutely amazing. What is the profile of the person's X% of people below this bought so such and such product? These kind of data are so revealing, then you can actually package your promotion accordingly. I feel that is an area probably which most of us are not fully exploiting, the power of the analytics to leverage it for sales.
Sure. So, Jeremy, let me come back to you and ask you, how are we looking at partly this conversion, but more importantly, with respect to giving a seamless experience to that user? So you have a store, and you said that you did pick up, the understanding of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc., to analyze what consumers want. But eventually, you want that your customer has a seamless experience, whether it's online, offline, mobile, however. How are you working towards that? And if you have an experience that you already achieved, do share that with us.
I think it's all about really initially understanding your brand, doing a lot of research to get customer kind of insights and opinions as to how they feel about your brand, trying to constantly redefine what your brand is about internally, making sure that all your team really understand and get, in inverted commas, the kind of correct interpretation of the brand, so that regardless of across the whole multi-channel business, you're speaking to customers in the same way. I think a very simple but very well-made point this morning was just making sure that you've got the same pricing strategy, for example, so that you've got the same price online as you've got in store. So it's really all about making sure that you give customers the same experience, regardless of whether they're in a store or whether they're shopping online or whether they're looking at what you're doing on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. It's making sure that you've defined that brand experience and that all of your team, and you've probably got different members of the team doing these different kind of social media or running the stores or running the internet site, they've got to really understand your brand so that they can express it in the same way, and then everybody that's visiting your various channels kind of gets the same feeling about your brand.
Right.
So
Yeah.
on this point, we see a lot of retailers talking about moving from offline to online or adding online as an additional channel. What we're seeing as well, and this is part of the branding exercise that you're talking about, is a lot of online-owned retailers are starting to open offline stores, and that's not as an extra sales channel, but it is a brand building exercise,
Right.
and it is a way to communicate with the customer. So this week, Boohoo announced that they're opening a store in New York. Zalora, Southeast Asian retailer, opened a store in Singapore, and that is a way for them to connect with the customer in a way that's different from the way that they normally do it online. So it really is about building a cohesive brand image for the customer.
But does that tell us a little bit about the kind of experience customers of today want? So they clearly don't want just an online experience. They want that touch and feel experience. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that that's necessarily the goal. I think what the goal is to offer a branding mechanism for that brand. It is a way to another channel through which to connect with the consumer. Through your people, through your brand, through your image, through your product, but it is key to not think of it as a sales channel or a channel to improve sales in the short term.
So let me ask you this: how does your website Namshi do? How does it get consumers to be sticky? How do they come back? This morning we were all talking about loyalty, do, see, think, care, and so on, but given that your fashion brand website, how are you ensuring that people go beyond just shopping or purchase on the website?
Sure, that's something we're thinking a lot about right now. There's obviously a lot of gimmicks that you can put forward to the customer, like loyalty programs and so on. But I think as long as you're not paying attention to the core offering to the customer and the core competency of the core offering to the customer, which is the convenience and the service, then they're not going to come back. You can put as many loyalty programs and other gimmicks as you want to. The customer is looking for a proper experience. They are looking for what we're trying to offer them is variety of over 500 brands and the ability to buy, receive the product within a very short period of time, 1 day, 2 day. Beyond that, it starts to get less sticky, And then once they receive the product, how do you serve them after that? So it's very similar to the offline setting, right? You can have loyalty programs, but those are not going to force customers to come back.
Mohammed, you want to add
Yeah,
to
I'd
that?
like to pick up this question. At the
Yes.
end of the day, you need to ask yourself, if you went to a shopping mall, if you went into Marina Home and you're treated badly, would you come back? If you, and it won't happen, trust me, it won't happen. If you go in there, you find your product, you're treated very nicely, the product is delivered within 1, 2, 3 days at your home, put in the right place, you love the experience, you don't get any customer loyalty, letter, whatever, would you go back there when you're in need of something else? Probably yes. In online, it's not different from that at all. You need the product, you need the service, you need the quality on all dimensions of touch points with the customer.
So in that case, if these are the tenets of a good retailer online or offline, what is your differentiating factor? How are you different from the service that any one of your competitors are giving? And that's the part I want to drive home. You know, the point I want to drive home is that what will differentiate your brand from another if most of you have figured out that, yes, I have to give them service, it has to be after sales, it's going to be great experience, second screen, and all of that. So how do you differentiate?
I think it's not easy to figure out that customer service is important. I think the difficult part is how to implement that. Right? You have airlines that have figured out that customer service is important, but you have Virgin and Etihad and Emirates that are doing a better job than Aeroflot. No offense to anyone from Aeroflot, but I think the idea here is implementation and execution is what differentiates you rather than figuring out the concepts.
Okay, like any traditional brand. Yes, Khursheed.
I think as the theme goes, next gen CEOs, etc., we also have a next gen consumer in front of us.
Yes.
And we got to think ahead, not just what we're doing today. Consumers are smart, they're sharp, they have expectations, but they also have a lifestyle. You know, obviously various categories. Unless we understand that aspect, the rest of the journey is not complete.
So what are the expectations of the consumers of Marina Home?
Oh, but I don't think it only applies to Marina Home. It applies retail in general, and then you categorize retail into, value, bridge brands, premium, luxury. And every category has consumers of a certain mindset, a certain expectations. It depends on their ticket value, it depends on what they're buying.
It's also dependent on who they are. So
Absolutely.
actually, let me take that point and just take it one step ahead by asking you: are you analyzing demographics? Are you looking at the kind of people who are coming to your stores? Are you naturally your brand is extremely women-centric because mostly women would be taking a decision on something like Marina
They are
Homes.
the primary customers. Decision
Right.
is generally taken together.
All right. So, but even then, so my question to you is that how are you approaching different demographics, keeping them in mind? Are you approaching technology differently or consumer loyalty differently? Because if you're saying the first point of contact, let's say, is a woman.
I think, again, it's a combination of things. It's first and foremost, you need to look at yourself, at your brand, and understand what are you offering. If your offering is right, then you understand what kind of demographics are you looking at. You look at competition, and you look at various aspects of customer service, etc. But unless you create a certain niche in the marketplace, you are one amongst many. That needs to be defined first.
I think that's a good point, creating a niche. Vivek, how do you see that happening for stores who have generally been in multiple products? Before we started this discussion, you were saying it's easier for me to tell you what I'm not into rather than what I am into because we have such a bouquet of products. So how do you toss up that whole issue of niche versus targeted marketing for products and stores of your own?
There's no doubt that at the end of the day, you have to finally find your own niche where you are much better than your competitor. Either you're offering a better value proposition or you're getting a better service. There has to be what you were talking, Shelley, about differentiation. I think that's what Khursheed is mentioning, that you've got to finally come to one particular segment. If this is your product, in this niche, I am going to be the best. And put all your resources, financial, digital, human resources to make sure you are the best in that niche. You own that category, as they say. So I fully endorse this view, because you can't be everything to everyone. You will just fall flat.
Are you all seeing the trend that mobile is driving majority of your businesses, or is that too soon for you to say?
I think it's, again, varies from business category to business category. In our business, which is more positioned as premium and upwards, much of transactions happen in store. Online plays a very small role. It's again, the various senses come in the picture. It's the touch, feel, measurement, comfort, and a fair price. So larger items, again, are purchased on the floor, smaller items online.
Maybe the research is done in the online and then...
Yes, of course. The homework is done online, but decision is a family decision, women, the primary drivers, and in-store.
Yeah, so basically people do use online to reach out to your store.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mentioned this morning as well. So if we look at our numbers specifically, given that we're an online-only retailer, at the beginning of 2013, 20 to 25% of our revenue was coming from mobile. Today, it is up to 70%. And this is for a category which is fashion. I think it's a lot easier to buy travel, a lot easier to buy electronics and so on from mobile. But even in fashion, which is inherently more difficult to purchase on mobile, we are seeing 70% of our volume coming from there. So dramatic shift, and it's probably one of the fastest growing mobile markets in the world at the moment. And it's just something that we needed to adapt to quickly. We could not have waited for that any longer. We would have left a lot of customers behind. And as such, it is a key consideration for us.
Great. Okay, before I open the floor to questions, let me ask each one of you one single question. Give me a one-word answer. If you look at a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put your use of technology in your business?
Are you asking me first?
Yes.
I think it's got to be right up there. It's got to be right up there, underpinning everything that you do. It's got to be part of the strategy. So it's got to be. I still think people come first. Customers come equal first.
So, but
and
today, where are you?
Technology is a support function, so it's up there, kind of 8 or 9 for me.
And you?
I think where comes first versus how important is technology?
No,
I think,
on a scale of 1 to 10,
No,
where would you put
I
technology?
mean, we're a technology company at the end of the day, technology and logistics company. So
You said it.
It is 10 for us, definitely.
Yeah. And for you, Mohammed?
I think the same. Pure online. In everything we do is technology.
Right. And where would you put it?
We're not too much online, but I would give it 10 because it goes hand in hand.
Vivek?
I would say between 5 and 6, because I think technology options are limitless. And I don't think we have even scraped 5% of it, I'll be honest.
That at least is an honest answer for sure. Okay, let's open this floor for some questions. Now, the way the questions work is that if you all see around you, there are at least 4 to 5 mics. We would request that you tell us that you have a question, and I'd like you to get closer to the mic that's around your table. Please introduce yourself and ask your question. So the floor is open. Please raise your hand for questions. Sure, please start. You need to go up to the mic. If you can see the mics on both left and right of your table.
My name is KK Roy. I have come from India. I have been in retail and apparel retail for the last about a decade, more than a decade in India with companies like Levi's and now with USI. With footfall increasing in brick and mortar stores, what technology is going to help checkout? Because in many brick and mortar stores, especially during festive seasons, it becomes a question, it becomes a challenge for the store crew to manage the queue during the checkout. So is there a technology which is either coming into being or is being used in some part of the world which can be adapted and faster checkouts can happen? Thank you.
Would you like to take that?
I have a very simple advice. Walk into any Apple store and see how they do things, because I think they optimize customer experience and they optimize efficiency. The easiest thing is if you go to supermarkets, some of the supermarkets Around the globe, they have self-checkout mechanisms, right? Which is still based on scanning yourself and then paying with a card. You could do the payment you need to look at the payment separately and at registering the product separately. Registering the product can happen through RFID if you go that way automatically. The payment solutions can vary from mobile payments, which is currently basically being lifted to another level, to the next generation level, or cards, or PayPal even by logging into a terminal, whatever it goes. But Apple, in my view, is the best advice to look at.
How do you deal with it, Khurshid and Vivek, when that happens?
I think he's very right. If you don't have a comprehensive or cohesive team that understands what technology can do within a retail environment, and if the team is not familiarized with on a regular basis, there will be gaps.
And the other, I think, limiting factor is that because the security angle, you have got to put some RFID or some, like in clothes you put. So inevitably that slows down the process.
Okay. It's interesting you mentioned security because that's coming up right after this as a session. Let's get some more questions. Some questions there at the back? Okay, let me ask a question, particularly because, he talked about security and talking about checkout consumer experiences. I think often people tend to lose their consumers at checkout because if the checkouts aren't great, then there is a fair bit of upset. Just in terms of the big picture, as one goes forward, the next 5 years or 10 years, how do you see the retail landscape in the region changing? Since everyone's here from the region, and some of you actually have multiple region location for your own businesses, particularly from here, do you see this becoming like a hub that goes beyond brick and mortar in a much bigger way than is anticipated, or are you suspicious of the numbers?
I think if you look at the history of this region, there has been a gradual growth in all aspects, particularly retail. But retail has always been very dynamic. It is here, shopping is not necessarily a necessity. It's a habit. Again, can be differentiated into various categories of spending. It will continue. The environment we are in, the positioning in terms of Dubai, building its status as its core position, as a hub, will continue. That will, in turn, make us as retailers look at it at a micro level, look at how service standards can be further enhanced, how the consumer challenge can be further met, how the lifestyle expectations of consumers change and how we adapt to those changes. It's a continuous process.
Yeah.
I think, if I may, just another way of looking at that, and just to add to it, is that going forward, retailers, particularly those with aspirations to take their business across the whole of the region, MENA-wide or GCC-wide, have to really understand that the MENA region and the GCC area is not one area where everything works. And you have to really look at what's happening in detail, country by country, and realize that customers in Kuwait can be quite radically different to customers in Saudi. And you can't just adopt a product or a marketing or any kind of business strategy that assumes that everywhere's the same.
Indeed. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I think not only has the audience gone back with plenty of insights, but I think technology stands out as the winner in this entire discussion. The future of retail will certainly have technology at the heart of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay.